Let's talk about the 6 essential process conditions of the dual capacity framework. The foundational support that we need to build into the planning of family engagement events, programs, and initiatives to ensure success. There are 6 of them. The first being relational, building relationships with parents. The second is linked to learning. So, are the activities and events providing parents with an example of links to learning at home? The third is asset based or strength based. Are we talking about solutions? Are we staying positive? Are we thinking about the strengths of the family and the strengths of the child? The fourth is culturally responsive and respectful, those equitable practices. The fifth is collaborative. How are we working together? And the sixth is interactive. And so how are we showing and modeling and really that hands-on learning experience for parents and the family during events and programs that we host? So there are some reflective questions in your learning packet. I just want you to take some time, look at those, and circle the questions that resonate with you most under each of those sections. As a reminder, with every new idea, you need to always consider what barriers may exist for families and students, and what you can do to minimize as many as possible. Families can be great allies for this step in the planning process. So oftentimes we have great ideas, we begin to implement them, and then we notice that people aren't showing up, or people say the time doesn't work for them. So it's really good to have parents give feedback on what would work best for them, or what are some of the issues that may be presented that keep them from attending or engaging. Some examples are transportation. I think especially in rural communities, we've seen how transportation can be a huge barrier. Childcare, if there's not child activities provided on site. Working families have to structure their ability to engage with the school around their work schedule. So having some of the working families on your committees and councils is sometimes not doable because we host those during the workday. So what are some of the workarounds that we can provide? What are some flexibility we can give, or what are some virtual options can we give to our families? Sometimes the parent is not the primary caregiver, so reaching out to the primary caregiver and involving them. Generational differences with grandparents or others who may not be as familiar with technology. I think many of us saw that during COVID, and the learning curve for some people to utilize the virtual platforms to engage. Language barriers are huge. I've spent a good deal of time working with some English language learners and have really been enlightened on some of the barriers that they face that I had not even considered. And so doing what we can to reduce those. Learning differences of students and the adults. So we have students who have learning differences. We also have families who have learning differences. And then our cultural differences and diverse expectations of the roles of families, educators, and the students can play. We're going to look at a table that kind of talks about the essential condition, gives an example touch point, and then kind of an example to see that essential condition in action. So that first one being relational, let's think about welcome letters to families at the beginning of the year. So we want to know a little bit about the family, but we also need to share a little bit about ourselves. And whatever you're comfortable with, maybe include that in a letter home. Maybe that's in a welcoming phone call, but that's a real good way to start to build that relationship, share a little bit about you in hopes that they'll share a little bit about them. Linked to learning, thinking about like a class party or another type of event where the parent may be at the school, and during that class party, maybe the student has the ability to show their parents what they've been learning. Example here is math tiles. And then the teacher can demonstrate 2 easy math games that they can maybe play at home using a deck of cards. Being asset-based, focusing on strengths, thinking about our parent-teacher conference as more of a family conference, and thinking about those funds of knowledge questions that we can have before we talk about maybe what some of the issues and challenges may be in the classroom setting for the student. But what is unique and special about your family? What are your goals and dreams for your child? What would you say are your child's greatest strengths? What calms your child down if he or she is upset? And how do you support your child's learning? And how can I help? And as a great high school example, my son, who's a new teacher for a freshman math class, is trying to get to know his students, but he's also recognizing that reaching out to parents and asking parents what they need as far as communication goes, as far as support for their child's learning, has been critical in these first few weeks of school, so that he really gets a sense of what he needs to do to meet their unique learning styles and to help them and support them the best way he can. Culturally responsive and respectful practices. So when we think about some of our larger group events, maybe we can host some smaller breakout um, groups or pods with families that are broken down by shared interests. So what are their passions? What are things that they have in common? And these can be very meaningful to remove some cultural barriers, connect people over their shared interest. Remember to remove any language, transportation, or childcare barriers when possible. So there's a great example given here. Collaborative, thinking about those middle and high school teachers making home calls. So a lot of kids to make home calls too. Maybe each teacher could set a goal to call 10 families before the end of the year and explore collaboration opportunities. So kind of seek feedback from parents around how to engage and strategize with middle and high school teens. How could they be more relevant? Teachers should connect and share experiences with each other after they've made these phone calls to improve on their strategies. And then interactive. So let's take the family math and literacy night. Setting up 6 round tables and having teachers orchestrate one 10-minute learning activity per table that they use in class or that can be done at home. And then parents and students rotate tables and play the games together while the teacher explains the important learning standards covered in the activity. So that interactive piece where we're modeling and doing it together, but also links to learning. You have information in your packet about these essential process conditions, and we're going to ask you to consider a family engagement touch point and how you can embed the 6 essential conditions. So I'm going to give an example before we have you utilize your learning packet. So here's an example. Back to school night. Thinking about building those relationships. Relationships are built on trust, so we have to have time to cultivate that relationship. It's really difficult at a back to school night to attend to all of the family's needs, students' needs. A lot of parents have students in multiple grade levels. So hosting different grade levels or spreading things out a bit can make an event more personal instead of trying to host the whole school at one time or even a whole district event. Add icebreakers, fun scavenger hunts, things so that families can meet with one another and meet with educators. Link to learning. So each teacher can share one way families can support their child's learning at home within the first month of school. A list of questions to ask at home, learning materials that they may need, or a suggested activity at home. Third would be that asset-based, strength-based essential condition. So consider your volunteer signups and think of ways that you can engage families that are kind of outside of the box. So we have our typical sign up for volunteer list that we do each year, but maybe if we're wanting to engage with other families, we think about what their strengths may be, and we tailor our volunteer form to include some of those things that we know parents would really like to do. Culturally responsive and respectful, making sure that our materials are translated, that signs are translated, and that we have interpretation available when needed. And then we need to make sure we advertise events in different languages too. There are several different ways you can do that digitally that make it easier, Google Translate and other translation options. And then consider hosting back to school events at community centers. So reduces a transportation barrier, but sometimes we can reach people in their community better than we can at the school building. And then collaborative, do with families and not to families. And you'll hear us say that a lot. Ask families what they would like to see at an event and ask educators what they have heard of or seen at other schools that they would like to replicate. So oftentimes we hear about fun things that other schools are doing that have been really impactful. and thinking about how we can maybe implement that at our school. And then asking English language learning families to mentor and guide new ELL families. So that could be really helpful to English language learning families who want to step up in a leadership role, but it's super important for new families to have that go-to person. And I've seen that play out, and it's really powerful when that ELL family is connected to somebody who can serve as that liaison between them and the school. And then interactive. Move information to materials only with like YouTube videos as needed. So most of the time can be spent in conversation between families and educators. So instead of just handing out information all the time, what can we do to improve the conversations that we're having with parents and educators? So ensure scavenger hunts and interactive games don't isolate parent and student, but rather opens up to all families and educators that are available. So sometimes we plan good events, but then it kind of isolates the family to do their own thing over here and not really engage with school staff or other parents. So consider this touch point and think about that activity. Maybe it's something you currently do or something you want to do. And I want you to go through in your learning packet and record each of the essential process conditions, some examples of ways that you can meet that in this activity. So moving on, I want to talk about the 4 C's from dual capacity to survey if your activities that you plan are working. And really to keep in mind that we're starting with the end in mind. So what do we want participants to gain from the activity? So these are the 4 C areas of dual capacity framework. The first is we want to build capabilities. Do participants have an opportunity to put new knowledge into practice? Did the participants gain a new skill that they now can use to support student achievement or increase their family school partnership? The second is making new connections. Did participants make new connections and expand their network? And were lasting relationships formed as a result of their involvement? And I think this one is really important because we plan some really cool things, but we don't intentionally plan for ways that families can connect to other families. And so if we're not doing that, we're not really building in that relational piece. And we know that that relational piece is what's going to really fuel those other 3 C areas. So once we have that connection made, we can almost do anything off of the connection. Changing cognition. Do participants have a positive shift in beliefs and values related to equity and excellence in education? And were participants encouraged to take on a more active role in their family school partnership team? And then fourth is building confidence. Do families have more confidence about supporting their child's academic and developmental needs because of this activity? And do teachers feel more equipped to engage and welcome families as partners? So let's give you an example of how you could use the 4 C's from the dual capacity to survey if the activity is working. So let's think about 2 survey questions that might be added to an already existing exit survey for the activity. The first, connections. Did you make at least one new contact at the back to school event? And if they did, you could consider that a successful connection. Second, confidence. Did you learn at least one way you can support your child's education at home? If the overwhelming majority of parents say that they did, you can be rest assured that your event probably did help them feel more connection to the school. They feel a little bit more confident about engaging in their students' education and engaging with the school itself.